For 39 years, whoever killed Melissa Ellison walked free. Free to work, to age, to grow old. And then, on an ordinary afternoon in July of 2026, that person allegedly picked up a phone and called the police himself. This is the story of a 20-year-old mother, a weapon pulled from her own fireplace, a baby who slept through it, and a phone call that took almost 4 decades to arrive. You are watching Nightfall Files. Everything you're about to hear comes from public records and official statements. Where a fact has not been proven in court, we will say so. The man now charged is presumed innocent. Nothing here is invented. Jacksonville, Florida, December of 1987. The Christmas lights were still up. In a quiet trailer home on Collegine Road lived a young woman named Melissa Ellison. She was 20 years old. To the people who knew her, she often went by another name, Missy Taylor. 20 years old and already a mother. In that trailer with her was her daughter, Casey, a baby, just 13 months old. Picture that home 3 days after Christmas. A young mom, a toddler, the ordinary clutter of a life that was only just beginning. We don't get to know Melissa the way her family did. But we know she was young. We know she had a baby girl she was raising. And we know that whatever plans she had for 1988, for watching Casey grow up, they ended in the early hours of December 28th, 1987. It was around 4 a.m. A roommate came home, or woke, and walked into the living room of that trailer and found Melissa on the couch. She was not sleeping. She had been beaten to death. The medical examiner's office would rule it a homicide. The cause of death? Blunt force head trauma. In plain words, someone had struck this 20-year-old woman in the head again and again until she was gone. And then there is the detail that makes this case sit differently in your chest. The weapon. According to investigators, Melissa was beaten with a charred log, a piece of burnt wood taken from inside her own fireplace. Think about what that tells you. This was not a gun brought to the scene. It was not a knife carried in a pocket. Whoever did this reached into the fireplace in that trailer, took out a log that had already been burned, and used it. A weapon of the moment. A weapon from her own home. And through all of it, the violence, the noise it must have made, 13-month-old Casey was there. By every account, the baby was not harmed. A child, barely walking, in a home where her mother was being killed, and she survived it untouched. That is the scene detectives were handed in the last days of 1987. A young mother dead on her own couch, a murder weapon from her own hearth, and a baby girl who would grow up with no memory of the night, but with the absence of a mother for the rest of her life. A weapon of opportunity, taken from the scene itself, tells investigators something important. It often points away from a stranger who came prepared and towards someone who was already there, someone for whom the violence was not planned, but happened in that room with whatever was within reach. That is a theory, not a fact, but it shapes how a case like this is worked. There was no sign, in the public record, of a robbery gone wrong or a break-in by a stranger passing through. A young woman, in her own home, killed with an object from her own fireplace while her child slept feet away. Detectives in 1987 would have started where they always start, with the people who were closest to her. In 1987, the tools were different. No widespread DNA databases, no cell phones pinging towers, no doorbell cameras on every porch. Detectives worked with what they had: interviews, physical evidence, the accounts of the people around Melissa. And for a while, they worked hard. But cases like this have a way of going quiet. Leads dry up. Witnesses move away or pass away. The file gets thicker, then it gets shelved. And the killing of Melissa Ellison became what investigators dread most: a cold case. A cold case is not a closed case. It is a wound that never healed. Somewhere in the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, Melissa's file stayed on the shelf, waiting. 1 year, then 5, then 10, then 20, then 30. And out in the world, her daughter Casey grew up. The baby from that trailer became a woman. She would live her whole life knowing exactly how her mother died, and not knowing who did it or why. Imagine carrying that question every single day. For nearly 4 decades, anniversaries are cruel to families like hers. Every December, the lights go up again. Every December 28th, another year passes with no answer. That is what a cold case does. It doesn't just take a life. It steals the peace of everyone left behind. But detectives do not always forget. Cold case units exist for exactly this reason: to pull the old files back down, to look again with new eyes and new science. And the Melissa Ellison case was never truly abandoned. It was only waiting for one thing to change, and the science did change. Evidence that meant little in 1987, a fingerprint that couldn't be matched, biological material that couldn't be tested, can, decades later, be run against databases that did not exist back then. Cases that were hopeless in one era become solvable in the next. The evidence didn't change. Our ability to read it did. That is the quiet hope inside every cold case file. Somewhere in the boxes, in the photographs and the evidence bags, the answer may already be sitting, waiting for the day the technology, or a conscience, finally catches up to it. What changed did not come from a lab. It did not come from a fresh piece of forensic evidence, at least not first. It came from a phone call. And it came from the most unexpected place imaginable. July 8th, 2026, nearly 39 years after Melissa's death, a man dialed the Clay County Sheriff's Office dispatch line. According to his arrest report, he told them he had information about a cold case murder from 1987. Sit with the strangeness of that. For 39 years, this case had no answer. And then a man calls, on an ordinary July day, to talk about a 1987 murder that most of the world had long forgotten. Who calls the police out of nowhere about a killing almost 4 decades old? His name is Gary Edward Glowacz. He is 70 years old. And within hours of that phone call, according to authorities, he was no longer a caller with information. He was under arrest, accused of the murder of Melissa Ellison. We have to be careful and fair here. What was said on that call and exactly why it led to his arrest are details for the courts. What we know is what the record states. He called, he spoke of the 1987 case, and hours later he was charged. The charges are serious. Gary Glowacz was charged with murder in the 2nd degree with a weapon, and with burglary, with assault or battery. In the language of the law, those charges describe someone accused of entering where they should not have been, and committing violence once inside. But hear this clearly, because it matters. Gary Glowacz has been charged. He has not been convicted. In this country, a charge is an accusation, and every person is presumed innocent until a court proves otherwise. The story of what truly happened in that trailer is now for a jury to decide. Still, the questions his arrest raises are impossible to ignore. If the allegations hold, why now? Why, after 39 years of silence, would anyone connected to this reach out? Guilt? Illness? Age and the weight of a life running out of time? We do not know, and we will not pretend to. On July 9th, 2026, Sheriff T.K. Waters stood before the public and announced the arrest, that a nearly 40-year-old murder had at last moved forward. For a department, closing a case this old is rare. For a family, it is everything, because there was one person for whom this announcement landed harder than for anyone else. The baby from that trailer, Casey. Now a grown woman, carrying 39 years of that unanswered question. Her mother's killer had a name attached to him now. An accusation, a face, a court date. Casey has spoken about what that news did to her. She described a ridiculous release of closure. She said it made her see the world differently, and she was honest about its limits, in a way that stays with you. She said, in effect, that nothing about an arrest brings her mother back. Nothing undoes 39 years. But knowing, finally moving toward an answer, is its own kind of mercy after a lifetime of not knowing. That is the part of these stories we can never let get lost under the true crime headlines. At the center of this is not a cold case. It is Melissa Ellison, 20 years old, a mother, a person with a life and a future, and the daughter she left behind, who has waited her entire life for this. So where does it stand tonight? A homicide from 1987, once cold, now active again. A 70-year-old man charged and awaiting trial. And a case that will finally be argued in a courtroom, nearly 4 decades after a young mother was killed on her own couch. There is a lesson buried in this one, and it is a hopeful one. Cold does not mean gone. Files are pulled back down. Detectives keep looking. And sometimes, after 39 years of silence, the phone finally rings. We will follow the Melissa Ellison case as it moves through the courts. When there is a verdict or a new development, we will bring it to you, carefully and truthfully, the way her memory deserves. I'm your host, and this has been Nightfall Files. If Melissa's story mattered to you, subscribe, so you're here when the next chapter is written. And remember, no case is ever truly closed while someone still remembers. Sometimes that someone is you.